Yesterday, I talked about moving the United States Banking Center to Los Angeles, to the financial district of Los Angeles, and like basing all of our banking decisions out of there. And I would probably live in Los Angeles, even though I talked about like we'll have offices in Santa Barbara. I think I would actually like live in probably the Hollywood area. But like what I didn't, and what I spent most of the day talking about was the Supreme Court and moving the Supreme Court to Las Vegas. And like I've been thinking about how to do the Supreme Court to fix it, because when was the Supreme Court created? Like 1800s, probably maybe even 1812. I'm not sure what year. That's my guess. But like, what is the problem with the Supreme Court? They don't do laws. No person shall be held to answer for a capital or otherwise infamous crime unless on a presentment or indictment of a grand jury, except in cases arising in the land or naval forces or in the militia when in time of war, nor shall a person be subject to then double jeopardy is what it talks about. So do we have grand juries in Colorado? No, we do preliminary hearings before judges. Do you have the right to a grand jury in Colorado? I don't know. All I've ever heard of is like you need to waive your right to a preliminary hearing. Does the Supreme Court know about that? And I'm not pointing at that, but does the Supreme Court know about that we don't have the right to a grand jury trial? Like what I'm telling you is that the Constitution is not what the Supreme Court does. Supreme Court does whatever they feel like doing. The Constitution is completely irrelevant. And my opinion is that the Supreme Court needs to go partially because the Constitution is completely irrelevant to them, but partially because like of the mafia, because it's organized crime that is choosing these people that are controlling decisions that are that important. And so like what I'm thinking is that we need 4 Supreme Courts. We need 2 business technical, because can finance and stuff like that get technical? Yes. We need two courts that are technical in the computer department, so they're tech experts, and hopefully those expertises overlap with other skills, and so there would be 10 members on each Supreme Court. So there'd be 4 courts, 10 members each. The tiebreaker would be the president. That's not checks and balances. The president's picking the Supreme Court, dude. Like if it's like my opinion is if they are that stuck on it, let's bring in someone that is like not them. And like so I'm still talking about like moving the Supreme Court to Las Vegas and California, like either Los Angeles or Santa Barbara. Like I think Supreme Courts tends to be kind of older people, so like they probably would prefer Santa Barbara, like where they can retire, like we do it in Montecito or something like that. But what I want to talk about is like why the Supreme Court doesn't know that like we don't follow the rules on juries. Like we don't do grand juries in the United States anymore, really. Like even the feds don't have to do grand juries for misdemeanor crimes, which like if you're telling me that the federal government is doing misdemeanor crimes, then like we're getting a little confused about I think a lot of us are confused about what it means to have a separation between the federal government and the state government in the criminal prosecution department. And like we think that like the line between federal and criminal might need to be a little more blurry, because who cares if they drove across a state line? Like I think we need to figure out like how to deal with the modern era with computers. And part of dealing with the modern era of computers is having a more informed Supreme Court and having more members of the Supreme Court. Because look at the population trends in the United States. So like in 1900, like how many people lived in the United States? Like 76 million. How many live here now? Probably close to 400 million. So we have the same size Supreme Court for the same amount of people, but the Supreme Court has like gotten more, well, we don't do Constitution. Like, and so what I've talked about is having like, in addition to those 4 Supreme Courts, which is like 40 people in the 4 Supreme Courts, there'd also be like the federal courts, obviously, but then there would be like, which would be the federal appeals courts. And then there would be like the investigative courts, which all you got to do is send a letter and say like, I don't have constitutional rights and here's why. Please investigate this. And then that's like a group of people that like their job is finding things to go before the Supreme Court. Because right now, how long does it take to get to the Supreme Court? My understanding is it's like years and millions of dollars. Like you will never make it to the Supreme Court. Like that's what people have told me. Like you will never make it. And do you have to make it to the Supreme Court? Generally, you don't. Like there's something called the exhaustive clause. And the exhaustive clause says you have to exhaust all possibilities of appeal before going to the Supreme Court. So you have to exhaust exhaust Colorado's appeals courts, and like in Colorado before you move on. And so there's an appeals process of like going through different courts. So, but like, and I still agree with the exhaustive clause, unless like the people that skip the exhaustive clause get involved and they say, this is not acceptable. Like you guys don't do the Constitution. Your job is not deciding what the law is. So I'm still talking about fixing the legal system because like, is it a problem that a state can go, well, we don't do the First Amendment, we don't do the Second Amendment, we don't do the Fourth Amendment, we don't do the Fifth Amendment, the Sixth, no, Seventh, maybe we should just use the number 10 on me. 10, I think we do 10, yeah, I mean, we just ignore 10. So like when like Colorado specifically is one of those states where the mafia is that powerful. Like how many people from my, like that I picked to help me hire people are from Colorado and I don't know them from Colorado? I don't know, like 4 probably. Meredith's from Colorado. Brittany's from Colorado. Lita's from Colorado. I don't know who all, but I know them all from Baylor because Baylor's like, everyone's from Colorado and everyone's from California and everyone's from like, it seems like Kansas a lot. And then they're from Texas that much. Like a lot of the people that I chose are from Houston. But what I'm trying to say is Colorado is that organized crime. And they're the one that just goes, oh, the Supreme Court's out there. They will never care about the Supreme Court. They'll never care about the actual Constitution. Like you'll never believe what these people are like in the legal system. Like they know the Constitution's not the rules because they're from Colorado and they know that it will cost you like $40 million. And you have to have that many lawyers, and it's going to take 2 years to actually get to the point that you can talk to the other people from the mafia that live in Washington, D.C., who have 400 freaking cases they're taking care of this year. And the reality is, like, that's too many. Like, there are too many people in the United States to only have one Supreme Court. And the mafia thing needs to stop. And so the Supreme Court needs to actually read the Constitution, and we need to rewrite it. And, like, and the Supreme Court has to go, okay, that's what it says. I can read English. It says you got a grand jury. Well, then, like, I mean, yeah, obviously you have to do a grand jury. Like, my job isn't to change the Constitution. I'm a Constitution scholar. I know that's the rules. Like, I know the Constitution's actual law. Like, that's the thing. Like, the United States knows the Constitution is not actual law because the mafia. And so, like, that's what has led to this situation where, like, the police can torture someone and, like, they can force them into pleading guilty for something that's, like, so freaking silly according to the Constitution. And, like, and they can do terrible, terrible things to people. And, like, and that's because, like, the mafia can take control of the police and the courts that much. So, 4 Supreme Courts, 10 people on each. 2 of the courts are business. 2 of the courts are technical. Like sciencey, and then the tiebreaker is the President of the United States, and we actually do Constitution. Like, so I looked up Colorado grand jury used, and they do have grand juries according to the statewide grand juries. The Colorado Attorney General uses statewide grand juries to investigate and prosecute crimes. Oh, so we're good. Grand juries are used sparingly in Colorado and are typically only used in serious and high-profile criminal cases. Most criminal cases in Colorado are handled without... Okay. So, like, I had to work my ass off to find the real answer because I know the answer. You're not using grand juries. There's no way you could use a grand jury. Like, you would never get that one through. Like, it's not... Like, I didn't even commit the crime. Like, you can't just be like... Well, I mean, like, you can't just convince a grand jury that easily. Like, I mean, so like, I don't think they have the evidentiary requirements to pass the grand jury test. So do grand juries have the same requirements as like a petit jury? you have to have a preponderance of evidence. Like, this is solid evidence. Like, I agree with moving this trial forward. That's not the same as beyond a reasonable doubt. So, like, I don't think that the DA could have made it through a grand jury, is my opinion, and they know it too. And, like, I didn't even get to do the preliminary hearing. Like, that's what happened. Like, the judge gave me contempt of court because I said I wanted to see the evidence that they were going to put forward. They said they had YouTube videos. And I was like, well, I need to see the evidence so I can bring my own videos. And then he put me in jail for contempt of court. Like, I think, like, it's pretty obvious that grand juries are not used in most of the states in the United States. And, like, in most of the prosecutions in the United States. And it's pretty obvious that's against the Constitution. But it's also pretty obvious that the Supreme Court, we didn't, no one told us about that. How in the world did no one tell me, us at the Harvard school, no one told us we had no grand juries. Oh, we're just the number one criminal law experts in the world. Yeah, so, like, all these, like, you got the President of the United States, grand juries? The constitutional law professor, you're saying that, like, the Constitution has something about them grand juries? Like, we got all these law experts, but no one, oh gosh, no one told me about the law being that, like, I'm doing everything against the law and no one cares. But that's because they need $40 million to do appeals for 3 years. They'll eventually get to talk to us about the grand juries if we let them. We probably won't. And that's the real problem. So how do I think we should do grand juries? I think it should be online. Like, you should get the discovery, like, they should show the evidence they have, and then everyone can say, yeah, this is a solid case, go forward with it. Like, no one has to show up to the courthouse. It's just an online thing. It's not as big of a deal, right? That's why you're not doing grand juries. And so